Boom! What's up, everybody? How are you? Hope you're doing well. Hope you're having a good morning. Hope that you've chosen to make today, if you're listening to this right now, a better day than it was yesterday. I'd like to take some time this afternoon and talk about my buddy Anthony. He's the fathead that I'm holding in this picture. He's a cool dude. He's a good guy. He's one of those guys that's like a secret squirrel good dude. Like, you ever have those friends that they sort of sneak their way into being amazing to you? Where you're just like, oh, this is just a buddy, this is just a guy, this is just a friend, whatever, he's a cool guy. And then all of a sudden they say something that necessarily means they've been paying attention. And you're like, hang on a minute, how did you know that? Comma, what made you want to say that? Suddenly you realize that this person who's just a normal buddy has actually got pretty large amounts of emotions and issues related to what you're dealing with also. And Anthony used to tell me things like, man, Tim, I get a lot out of listening to what you say. And I was just astounded by that. By somebody who I looked at as like a pretty responsible guy with like a job and a life. Like, he seemed put together to me. He seems put together. He's a put together dude, you know? If you ever met Anthony, you'd think that's a put together guy. But then, you know, he's facing some of the similar problems mentally, or issues that I am, maybe. You know, some of the same quandaries and conundrums that I'm facing. And it's like, oh, it's not a class thing. It's not a money thing. It's not a have and the have-nots. It's just the humans and the non-humans. It's like I'm driving in this car, talking on this phone, and those are non-humans, right? And then here I am, being a human, talking about a human. So just these differentiations between humans aren't really necessarily that helpful. I mean, they help for identification purposes, like, oh, that's that person over there. Well, which person? There's 40 persons. Well, it's the person wearing the yellow hat. Well, which yellow hat? They're all wearing yellow hats. Well, the one wearing the yellow hat and the shirt and the pants. Well, they've all got those on. Which one do you mean? Oh, the one with the long hair or the short hair? Oh, long hair. Okay, those are identifiers. Those are personal things. But then if you get to know all 40 of those people, you could say, oh, that's Sheila. You know, Sheila, or Frank, or Bob, or Bill, or Joe, or Pat. So then you can tell things characteristically about people that make them different. But really inside our heads, inside our head spaces, we're really a lot of the same thing. And Anthony Noel reminds me of that time and time again. I'm purposely doing this podcast just a little bit earlier because I was hoping that Anthony would miss it and listen to it later. He's not on Facebook a whole bunch, so I'll have to send him the link via text. But Anthony, if you're listening, buddy, I missed the heck out of you. This seminar wasn't the same without having your goofy butt around. Your jiu-jitsu is better than it is mine, your jiu-jitsu is better than mine, and I have good jiu-jitsu because of you. Because you kept me honest. And your tiny little body would often trick me into thinking I can bully you around. And then you showed me wrong. And I think that's from years of rolling with Dave Clutter and getting crushed by his tiny little body, which probably isn't tiny anymore. It's probably all muscular like it was before he left. But, you know, these guys are normal human beings. What I mean by that is, if you were to look at them, you would say, that's just an average person. But what you don't know is underneath those average clothes is a monster, a killer, a murderer, right? But I mean, like, that's the capacity that we all have. There's no difference between Dave Clutter, Anthony Noel, and Tim Locklear, Scott Huff. These people are all the same persons, but there's this difference in them that necessarily makes them, I think it makes them better people. I don't know. Seems like it makes them better people. Because wouldn't you say that if you were to just compare two persons, one that's self-aware, considerate, and thoughtful, and another that isn't, well, if you were to compare those two, which one would you pick spending time with? I feel like you'd probably pick spending time with someone, or the one person who's a bit more thoughtful, a bit more considerate, a bit more self-aware. It doesn't mean that you would look at the two persons and say one has less value than the other. But to you, if you were going to spend time with someone, if you were going to choose to pick someone to spend time with, you'd probably very likely pick spending time with someone who is a little bit more thoughtful, self-aware, and considerate. And so then it might be easy in a case of good versus bad to say, well, that's a good person, that's a bad person. That's not true necessarily, but for the sake of discussion and or argument or whatever, it can be helpful. So if we look at the comparison between, say the average individual and Dave Clutter, Anthony Noel, Scott Huff, Gabe Marin, you look at these dudes, you look at these humans, and you say, what is the stark contrast? What is the difference? What is the bigger deal? Like, why would somebody want or choose to spend time with someone versus someone else? It's not just about personality. It's not just about taste or preferences. There's something else. There's something in there. And you can call it whatever you want. You can call it vibes. You can call it integrity. You can call it self-awareness. You can call it whatever you want. It doesn't matter. And in fact, labeling it becomes deleterious. Because then you get into conflict and contradiction, and it's like, well, no, I think it's this, and no, I think it's that, and then it's this, and then da-da-da-da-da. Labeling it is less important. What I can tell you is this, beyond a shadow of a doubt. If you find somebody that you can spend time with that actually necessarily can markedly make you move up on the pegboard, become feeling, looking, and actually being a better human being. If you find someone who can do that, it doesn't matter much else. Hang out with them, spend time with them. Because the people that I know that are wealthy and are successful in life and are happy, this is what they've done. And they do it with very little apologies. Many people call them rude, obtuse, weird, whatever, but it's like they've chosen very specifically to whom they're going to give their attention and of how much they're going to give it. And they're very intentional about it. And you wouldn't guess that with Anthony because he's very subtle and sly about it. But regardless, he's pretty intentional. I got a friend of mine who sometimes calls him Dumb Anthony because there's another Anthony. And it's funny, it's a joke, but at the same time, it's terrible and not true. Anthony is the farthest from dumb and stupid, and it's unfortunate that we don't get to spend the time together that we do, but I'm glad that he is in a better place. Phoenix is sort of the graveyard for old people. It's where they go. I remember a joke from Louis C.K. about Phoenix and Phoenicians, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should Google it because it's definitely not safe for work, but it's quite funny. It's interesting. I've arrived at that subject on a Sunday morning at 8:34, but regardless. Anthony was missed mostly because this photograph in this cover photo for this discussion here was taken yesterday at the seminar that a friend of ours was hosting. A friend of ours named Ernesto. He has a dojo, a gym, a jiu-jitsu academy, where we do this jiu-jitsu, where we choke people, where we attempt to murder humans, where we as upright bipedals try to make unconscious without permission other upright bipedals and or remove their limbs from their normal places of existence. It's fun. It's a good time. But it wasn't the same because having Anthony there, or people like Anthony, or people like Nick Evans or Nick DeZona, these people are good people. They make bad decisions, sure. But can I just submit that the reason that they're good at jiu-jitsu, the reason that these people are good at jiu-jitsu is because they've made copious amounts of mistakes and errors, right? Like, it's totally true that errors lead to development and advancement. The only way to grow is errors. You're going to make them. You're going to make them. You're going to lose. You're going to fail. You're going to do poorly. You're going to be embarrassed. You're going to feel like you've never done this thing called life before. It's going to happen. And if it's not, you need to question what you're doing, okay? If you're going through life, if you're living your life in a way that's super duper comfortable and not really many things are challenging to you, well, consider what you're doing and consider why you're doing it. You know, I was sitting there getting my hair cut the other day, and this lady tells me about how she's got cats and how she doesn't really like them, but they're there and they're just kind of around. And I was like, have you considered getting rid of them? And she said, what are you, a therapist? Seriously, this is what she said. I was like, what do you mean? What am I, a therapist? Of course not. Of course I'm not a therapist. I'm simply asking you a logical answer. You live a life that's mostly free. You're under very little tyranny. You experience almost no hardship. I'm assuming, which is so rude and terrible of me, right? But in comparison to, say, other human beings on this planet, you experience such little hardship if you live in America. Such little. Just by the nature of the country we live in, we are entitled to a bit more pleasure and joy. You understand? That's a fact. And so the fact that you're upset about the fact that you can't figure out what to do with your cats, it's not wrong, and you're not dumb or bad, but it's an easy fix. Do you like the cats? No, get rid of the cats. What do you mean get rid of them? Give them to somebody else. Sell them. Open the door. I don't know. Figure it out. But if you're unhappy about your cats being in your house, then you're lucky that that's your only freaking problem in life. And I asked her, I was like, have you ever considered maybe getting something? Because apparently she's also allergic. It's the dumbest thing in the world. Allergic to cats, can't stand the cats, keeping the cats around just because it's easier. Isn't that the American way? Just sort of dying in slow desperation without really taking any steps towards changing what's really right in front of us that can be changed. There's so much that's right in front of us that can be changed. There's so much right in front of us that can be changed. There's so much that's right in front of us that can be changed. One more time, you ready? I might lose everyone if all one of my listeners this morning. You might lose everything if you don't change. Anthony taught me that change is part of life. He did this without even speaking. He wasn't a prolific speaker. He wasn't witty necessarily. I mean, he was smart and he was very freaking funny, but he wasn't witty. Like, there wasn't a wit about him. You know what I'm saying? But he was wise. And he lived his life in such a way so as to necessarily show that change comes from action. You gotta move. He did that with his jiu-jitsu. He was he had the capacity to be exceptionally aggressive with his jiu-jitsu, and I like that. I like that a lot. He was always very sweet and kind and compassionate, but man, his jiu-jitsu was very strong. And I like that about training partners like Anthony. Having someone that you can attempt to murder changes your relationship with them, because then you're all of a sudden able, when you see someone in public that you've attempted to murder, you're like, hey, what's up? You know something. It's almost like you're in this club, this special thing where it's like, I don't just know this person. I've almost killed this guy. Or the other way around for me, most of the time, people have almost killed me. Hi, how are you? You've almost killed me. You've almost killed me. Yes, you've almost killed me. It's amazing. And I think the reason it's so appealing to lunatics like me is that there's this thing in us, this warrior in us that wants to fight, that wants to struggle, that needs the fight. We need it. I think. I don't know. Listen, I'm going to go mow some lawns. I already said that. I'm going to get off this little potty-casty dilly here. But the moral of the story is, if you've got an Anthony Noel, if you've got yourself a good person that holds you accountable and makes you work hard, well, don't lose them. Don't lose sight of them. Don't let them run off. I mean, don't hold them so tight they can't breathe, but definitely don't neglect your relationship with that individual. Take time. You understand me?